All right. Imprecation is a death metal band out of Houston, out of the Houston, Texas area, and this is their third full-length album since reforming in I think it was about 2009 or 2010, where they'd reissued their first compilation back from 1995. If you don't know the band, it's definitely sort of a fixture in the Texas death metal canon, who had formed in the early 90s, put out a couple of fairly influential and what I would say pretty notable death metal demos and EPs, um, and then split up in around 1998, which, it probably would have been the prime time to keep going. But when they reformed, they were better than ever, and I've been a fan, ever since kind of trying to get their compilation when it was a very expensive item pre reissue. So a lot of history there. I won't really get into it because I already did when the last album came out. Um, but generally speaking, it's just you know I think this band is as important as like a Drawn and Quartered or a there's a couple of groups I mentioned in here uh, that are sort of along those lines. Like Blaspherian is very much related, obviously, but like Agoraphobia or A Lethal Prayer, it's sort of one of those bands where like a lot of people know them, but not a lot of people pick them up and remember that this was kind of an awesome thing that um, really added a lot to United States death metal and stuck with the sort of important contributions from United States heavy metal, uh, to a degree where a lot of people let that stuff kind of fall away in the wayside and follow trends. So in the meantime, while they were split up, these guys all basically are all involved in black metal bands and pretty notable ones too. Um, they eventually picked up, I think, the guitarist from Averse Sephira and a couple of other pretty great bands. And their unfortunately, their drummer passed away after they completed this album. He was in a couple of pretty cool black metal bands too, and thankfully they've got sort of this last pretty great, pretty representative album before he'd passed. Um, so the big thing that I say about this record overall, I think, is that it really reminds me of sort of the 88 to 1994 ish area of uh, pure death metal, uh, touching upon the satanic aspect of um, not only lyrical inspiration, but a bit of black metal inspiration and incorporating those two. So, what it reminds me the most of is sort of Mike Browning's contributions to Acheron, which I think were mostly between 92 and 96, something somewhere around there. And the yeah, so the keyboard interplay here is sort of the cue, but also the guitar rhythms. Now, Imprecation have their own riff style that sort of developed over the course of the last three releases. I think they had different guitarists over time, but they still have their sort of signature rhythmic uh, groove and tension to their music. And here the riffs are kind of going wild. They're kind of thrashing. There's a lot of what I would consider bestial death metal uh, rhythms here, and not necessarily fully blackened death metal, but uh, definitely emphasizing the sort of rushes and blasts that the drummer was known for since the beginning of the band. So there's a lot of really characteristic things going on this album, and that makes it a lot more exciting because there's no point where you don't feel like you're listening to an Imprecation record. And that's what I want. I like a band with an not only a personality, but one that flaunts it in a like a cool way, right? And has the riffs to back it up and writes songs. So it's an interesting note for me to say this is not necessarily a flat out riff album, but one that presents songwriting. And I think both on the brutal and just interesting and theatric side of things. So there's a lot of it's one of the reasons why I gave it a high score. I think I scored the last one a little bit higher, even even though I think I like this one a little bit more in some aspects. But this is um, definitely an album that I'll listen to more often. One that I'll go back to when I want to listen to Imprecation, because I feel like it represents their sort of trip over the last three records. And it'll be interesting to see what they do next, because it'll will inevitably be fairly different, or at least keeping up with this style, but in different hands. So uh, yeah, it's going to be one of my higher recommendations this month, and just a good all-around death metal record. So more thoughts in the review. You can check that out, or just think for yourself and figure it out however you will.